For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rick Brimacomb, and on behalf of the Minneapolis Club, because this was a partnership with them going back to when I started in 2007, they have been my partner in crime, if you will, for the whole Club E journey, so thank you very much to the Minneapolis Club. My firm, Brimacomb Capital, invests in early stage companies. I have some portfolio companies here. I have folks from the Celtic Croft, raise your hand. And then also Cora Leibig is one of our speakers today. She's also one of my portfolio companies. And then got a couple of folks from Highland Bank. Would you all raise your hand? Anyway, the Highland Bank crowd is important for a number of different reasons. They've been my second longest sponsor at Club E, Irish Titan. Darren Lynch, one of my speakers, has been the longest, but Highland Bank's stuck with me through the whole COVID journey and going digital and now back in person. So thank you to Highland Bank. Highland Bank also is my main investor with Brimacomb Capital, so they're supportive on that front. And then lastly, I'm on their board and hopefully add a little value to their business journey in that regard. So anyway, thank you to all the sponsors. And as I mentioned, I started this in 2007, so this is actually the 16th year. We had an event in early March and actually had an event. I was at an event for Darren Lynch of Irish Titan like 2 days before the universe got shut down. It's a blessing that I'm here and a blessing for all of you to be here. So thank you for kind of rebooting this with me. We're still, massaging a few of the details, a little bit of a trial run, getting things back going. So thank you for your support. Thank you for your patience and your involvement. When I got this going back in 2007, what I wanted to do is provide peer support, actionable content, and productive relationships. And the idea was that people could learn something at lunchtime, bring it back to their office, and like that afternoon start doing some new things, or maybe meet somebody new that allowed them to grow their business. And the Minneapolis Club had a lot of big company things. You wanted to hear the CEO of 3M speak or head of the Federal Reserve, local Federal Reserve or whatever, and I kind of went the other direction and wanted to bring stuff that the average business person, put myself there too, we're all just out there grinding, trying to grow our businesses, and so that was the intent. And if anybody has ideas for how I could make this better or content as we go forward or styles of events, so we're kind of reimagining everything. So again, thank you for being here and for the support. And a little emotional kind of because it's been so long and so much happened and mostly good, but some other things that weren't so good. So thanks for being here. Yeah, thank you. I mentioned our sponsors, Irish Titan and Highland Bank. Thank you to them. And then as a little bit of a prelude to our speakers, Darren and Cora, like two of some of the favorite CEOs that I interact with, know them both personally and professionally, so I'm looking forward to having them. Again, today's topic is It's Lonely at the Top. We're going to riff off into a bunch of other things, and I'll try to carve out a little bit of time at the end to allow you to raise your hand and chime in to share any questions and such. RSVP, we're still kind of working some of the kinks out there. It's kind of a combination of Minneapolis Club and me. I think we're going to take more of that onto our shoulders, and things might be looking a little different as we go forward. So have patience as we work through that. Clube.com is the website. Reminder, I got 400 videos or so there, and on the YouTube channel Club E. You can see all the past events. You can also sign up for the newsletter. If you're not on the newsletter, LinkedIn group, we got 1,700 people there. And for all you fabulous sponsors out there. We can reach about 20,000 business people in the Twin Cities and have an email list of about 15,000. I mentioned the Minneapolis Club. Again, Heather can help you with that. And then a lot of the Zoom from Hell stories, if you saw that little marketing piece, were not something that I could share standing up here. So I'm going to just skinny down the stuff that I got. And Jody, raise your hand. Of course, maybe she wouldn't. Wait, forget that I just said that. I heard from a friend that there was a religious service going on, and it was part in person and part Zoom, so it was a hybrid thing. And that's actually one of the questions I was going to ask Cora and Darren about, is managing companies in a hybrid environment. And when you're at home, you want to be careful about having your camera turned off. And this couple did not have their camera turned off. And if you think of what doesn't go very well with a religious service, you can kind of know where I'm taking the conversation. But this is family friendly. I have actually my son Eli in front, so I don't want to get off track too far. Although he's in his 20s, but nonetheless, it gets a little awkward, so you got to not share too much stuff. But anyway, so Jody's our winner, and you can piece the rest of the story together. I have a gift certificate here that Jody can come get. I got a better version in my email, so if you want to talk about that, you can see me afterwards. But for the video's sake, I'm going to leave it at that. All right. Future events, December 1st. The future is fractional. And Kathy, we're right over here. Kathy's one of our panelists for December 1st. The future is fractional. We're talking about fractional execs. And then we have marketing with meaning. And where's Pete? Over here, same table. Pete is our speaker in January. That's January 12th. We're going to go back a week because of the holiday. And then February 2nd, we're going to be doing family businesses. I have 3 pairs of people who do business together, and actually Rick Wall, sponsor, friend, board chair in the very back. I caught him eating a little bit. Rick is going to, he hasn't firmly committed, but I'm committing him right now. He's going to be on the panel with one of his siblings. So we got a sibling pair with that. I have the husband-wife team over here, Joseph and Lori, and then Pat sitting over here, another one of my, actually, I didn't give Livestream Learning Studio the shout out either, another portfolio company. Pat is the president there, and their CEO and a family member to be named later, probably a child. So I think I got the husband-wife team, the sibling team, and a parent-child team, and that's going to be our panel on February 2nd. So lots of good stuff. With that said, Cora and Darren, why don't you come on up? Again, we're rebooting this. We can do anything we want, whether it's a style of event, whether we do things at night, more social, any kind of content that you all want. So please see me with any ideas. We're all ears and want to create something that works for you. I'm super excited to be here. Excited to share everything again with friends and family and portfolio companies. You all, truthfully, are dear to me, and it was a big void in my life not having this, and it's great to be back. So thank you. Okay, I think we're in business here. All right, so where do we start? Let's start with, I've introduced you to kind of at a high level, but why don't you take like a minute and then just give your background, a little bit about your company. Cora, let's start with you.
So my company is Chromatic 3D Materials. We do industrial grade 3D printing, so we're implementing 3D printing at a range of manufacturing environments, on manufacturing floors. And the core to our technology is actually the chemistry. We do plastics 3D printing, so we develop the chemistries that go into these technologies. So we're going anywhere from, I just got back from a trip to Germany. The applications really literally are head to toe. So we have customers ranging from convertible soft top covers for cars, to hearing aids, to toilet paper, to shoes. So, but what's common in all of that is they all need to use and apply the plastic in a way that totally changes how they do their manufacturing in a more efficient way and open up new designs for it. So I founded it about 6 years ago. We've raised about $10 million so far. We're in early revenue, really, and we've got a lot of, very rich pipeline of customers. We're based here in Minneapolis, as well as we have opened a subsidiary, which is a whole nother story, in Germany. So we have a German subsidiary.
And then, Cora, just a quick question for the audience. Prototyping has been 3D printing in the past, and so you're like opening the gate to manufacturing of industrial strength commercial products, correct?
Right. So our materials are all made so that they're just as strong as what everyone is used to in their products. And so it goes a lot of seals and gaskets that just can be really durable, just very durable printing that's industrial grade is the plus.
And then Europe is just a little ahead of the United States, hence the office in Europe and all the customers and traction you have.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Darren.
Hi, everyone. Rick, thanks for getting us going again. Appreciate it. Looking forward to it. I'm Darren Lynch, just a guy who can't afford a haircut or a shave. In addition to that, I am the founder and CEO, of Irish Titan. We are an e-commerce agency, so that means we build and grow e-commerce channels. So we build our merchants, that's how we refer to our clients. We build their websites, and then we work with them on an ongoing basis for their email marketing, paid search, SEO, those marketing activities that draw people to the site, get them to convert, and come back to the site. I started the company way back in 2004, so we are grizzled veterans by e-commerce standards. We have, I think it's about 44 Titans right now. That's how we refer to our employees. One of them sitting right here. Thanks for everything you do, Eli, and I apologize. He's on our sales team, so he has to deal with a lot of my no notice. For example, can you make a 2 o'clock meeting today? Actually, this is a real question. Okay. I meant to ask you earlier. We have, like I said, 44 Titans. One of the things that's unique about us a little bit is that we do all of our work with just our Titans. We have a Titan-only model, as we refer to it. And that means we don't use any contractors, freelancers, or offshore resources. So that has led to, I think, a little more focus on culture, a little more focus on people, because we don't have the luxury, if you will, or just the option, depending how you want to look at it, on pulling in contractors, freelancers, and offshore resources if we need some work done. So it's required us to narrow our focus, if you will, to what we do, the technologies we use, et cetera, hire well, retain well. We're opening an office up down in the Texas area. I was just having, in not the Texas area, that's a state, in the Austin area. I was just having this conversation at the table. It's not a tax play, nor is it a prospect play. We get about half our leads from our tech partners, companies like Shopify, PayPal. Those would be ones that everybody knows. And there are a significant number of them headquartered in that area, but we have no competition headquartered in that area. So we're doubling down on our deal flow by opening an office up down there, and that's worked out really well for us. Last thing I'll mention, we're closed only 2 days a year, St. Patrick's Day and the day after.
What about the day after the Spooner Rodeo?
Yeah, we're definitely closed on that day too.
So Darren and his daughters have done the Spooner Rodeo with our family for a number of years. So Darren, on the business front, the kind of the more complex sale, the better. And as people think about where you fit in the world, kind of a simple, almost a billboardy kind of sales experience is not really where you fit. You like more challenging e-commerce sales, correct?
Correct. We like some of the stickier, hairier kind of projects that I think require more of a. You're going to hear a lot of green references the more I talk, right? Because everything green's a write-off. But more of a green glove instead of white glove, green glove sort of experience where we have to engage real closely with the merchant on exactly what they're trying to accomplish, what they're trying to integrate, for example, with their e-commerce system and perhaps ERP as an example. So I think that's also driven by our Titan-only model. We don't compete really very well with someone who has an offshore model because they could and usually are much cheaper than us, and sometimes that's right. Like if someone has a real straightforward need, maybe they're just launching their first product or it's a real simple product, then that might be the right start. But we tend to be playing in a little bit more complex spaces. So for example, some of our clients, Minnesota Wild, our client, we're proud of that. The Green Bay Packers are our client. I apologize, any Vikings fans. I'm a Steelers fan, so I don't have a dog in this hunt. But we tend to do that. We have a lot of B2B clients, et cetera. So a mix of complex e-commerce operations.
Great. So let's stay down with you. Was there an aha moment that you had when you started your company?
Not really. I sort of knew, I knew from an early age that I was going to start my own company. I grew up on a farm in Iowa, and there were pictures of me on the tractor with Dad wearing like a tie and stuff. So I think Dad knew I wasn't going to grow up to be a farmer. And I remember so half the year the school bus would get close to my house on gravel and take a left, and then I'd be getting off at like 3:45. Half the year it'd take a right, and I'd get off at like 5:30. And so the half the year that I would get off late, many times I would get off at that T intersection and run home so I could watch Batman at 4 o'clock on Channel 9 out of Cedar Rapids, the old Adam West Batman. Some of you have heard this story, and some of you have been to our space and know that we have a bat pole, hint of foreshadowing. And so I remember one day when I had gotten off at that T intersection, ran home, watched an episode, and my dad came in. My mom was a teacher. She was home by this point. And I told them, someday when I'm a grown-up, I'm going to own my own business, and I'm going to have a bat pole. And so I think from an early age, I knew I was going to do that. I had the good fortune of working for some really good bosses. My first job was at Principal Financial Group. Best boss I ever had, still to this day, was my first boss there. His daughter lives up here now. I've taken her out for dinner, et cetera. And so I migrated from good boss to good boss to good boss until I had really run the course of working for other people. I don't always take direction super well. I had a vision of the kind of company that I wanted to build, the kind of company I always wanted to work for. So I didn't really have an aha moment. My first e-commerce project was when I ran what we would now call the back-end portion of Office Max's e-commerce launch in 1998. So that's forever ago from an e-commerce perspective. Then I launched Wilson's Leathers e-commerce. Many people are familiar with them here in town. Then Second Swing Golf, and then I started Irish Titan because I felt like I needed to jump off the cliff and make the net on my way down.
Great, thank you very much. Cora, interesting background that you've had. Tell everybody a little bit about that and how that dovetailed into you starting your company, and was there an aha moment along the way?
There's definitely a series of aha moments, but my background is, I'm not a Minnesota native. I came up in the plastics industry, which, many people are like, there's a plastics industry. Yes, there's a plastics industry. I spent 12 years in Dow Chemical. And what I learned there, what's amazing at a company like Dow is that it's really supplying the world's plastics. Like you start to see where everything goes, who makes what. And very early on, it was just astounding to me how the supply chain was just so complicated and needed better solutions. So the way a lot of materials are made is that you make a material in one location and then you got to ship it all over the world, and it ruins innovation, and it actually has a lot of inefficiencies associated with it. So I always, from the beginning of being at Dow, I started to think about how could you fix this? How could you fix this? And I had a big aha moment. Of all things, my kids do speech and debate, And when your kids do speech and debate, you have to judge speeches. And so I was judging a finals round on an informative speaking, and this senior got up and talked about what was happening in 3D printing. And I had a sketch of a business plan by the end of his speech. And I was, and I had heard about 3D printing before that, but what he was able to explain was just how pervasive it was getting and it was becoming, and how much the industry had grown. And I looked at it and I said, if you could make the same kinds of materials with the same strength as what we were able to make in my time at Dow, and deliver it in 3D printing, it could totally solve a lot of these logistics problems. And that was before we really had logistics problems. And so, but that was definitely the aha moment. And I remember talking to his mom afterwards, and I was like, I think I may have offered your son a job on my sheet. But it was also at the time that I was having to unwind a clean tech company. So I was in a startup. I was already out of Dow. I was in a startup, and I was having to unwind it. And it caused me to be looking for, I started to realize that some of the negative culture elements that we had in that company weren't personality driven. I mean, it always seems personality driven, but it really, it was, if you went to an industry conference, you could tell everyone was just having a terrible time, that there were some major problems in the industry that was causing all of us to have difficulty. And so it caused me to also want to look for, where's there an industry that is vibrant, where people are excited about the growth, and I want to be there. And so that's really that combination of learning about what was happening in 3D printing, knowing that I had a background that could really make a difference and solve some problems that maybe even people in 3D printing hadn't realized they could solve, together with looking for a vibrant and exciting market to play in, was definitely that series of aha moments.
And a super cool industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
So today's title's It's Lonely at the top. You both have been the CEO's position for a number of years, so some of this might be in the rearview mirror, but Cora, maybe we'll start here. Talk a little bit about how it can be lonely leading an organization. So
when I started Chromatic, I did not have a business partner, and I think that's probably a blessing and a curse. The curse side is definitely that loneliness side. You don't necessarily have someone who you're kind of sloshing things through with as you're trying to build the business. The benefit is that I hear that oftentimes it's the partner you need to slosh things about, but I think that having one of the challenges of starting your own business is that there's a lot of advice that you've got to filter, and some of it's good advice and some of it's bad advice, and sometimes it's bad advice filtered with good advice, and no one actually knows the right answer. So and you don't really have necessarily the best people to talk to in your company, right? You don't necessarily want, you don't want to necessarily be talking about the challenges of the business with, product chemist number 3, so it's, and I remember that there was a point where, I would often talk things over with my husband, and I remember there was a point, it probably was about 10 years ago, where he's like, the stuff you're having to deal with is way over my head. Like, I can listen, but I don't have a lot of advice to give. And so that's definitely an element of the loneliness, is that there's a lot of internal workings that you have to do, but also you have to find the people that you can trust who also have wisdom that can help you along the way. And I mean, Rick, you've been a great help in that respect, and I'm really grateful for it. We've been working together for almost 2 years. I'm also part of a CEO cohort, and that's also been helpful, and Paul is part of that. So it's those are some of the things that I've been doing.
Great. Darren, how about you?
Yeah, I think this theme is right, and I'm not trying to mince words. I don't know if I would use lonely necessarily, because that sort of implies sad, right? And I've never been sad at the top. It is isolating sometimes and pressure filled, right? We're not running socialist vegetable gardens. And so you do have to make the decision a lot of the time, right? Like there's a model that I like that talks about the 3 decision levels. The top, it's sort of a pyramid. Level 1 decisions are ones that I make. Level 2 decisions are ones that we make, and level 3 decisions are ones you make. And when you're running a business, you have level 1 decisions that you need to make, right? And sometimes that means you're going to bed terrified every night, waking up terrified every morning, and still going into the office energized. And so it can be pressure filled, it can be isolating or lonely because of all of that. And I think that those of us who migrate toward that and stay in it long enough just have an ability to withstand that or an interest in that. And I think sometimes we glorify entrepreneurs sometimes in some of the, like, I'm not a giant fan of traction. There are lots of elements of traction that I like a lot, but I think it glorifies the visionary too much and puts too much grunt work on the integrator, for example, just to oversimplify. And it's not that the Cora or I or people wired like us are any better, it's just we're different in how we tolerate that, because that is something we deal with on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis. There were times in Irish Titans history where, because I've bootstrapped it, don't have investors, and have grown it, and I also didn't come out of the industry where I took a book of business from my previous employer, right? There were times where I did go to bed terrified every night, wondering how the hell I'm going to make payroll, and that happened more than once, and so that can be lonely or pressure-filled or isolating, but that's you get up and go to the office every day.
Stay there for just a moment. Couple things. Number one, imposter syndrome. It's a term that maybe some of you have heard of, maybe others not so much. Did you have any sense of imposter syndrome when you first became a CEO, number one? And then number two, what have you done over the years to kind of build your support network of kind of trusted confidants, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, so I think that probably any of us would be lying if we said we didn't suffer from imposter syndrome at certain times. I think we all do. I think by those standards, I probably suffered on kind of the low end of that scale or less. One of the things a guy told me a long time ago was that I reminded him of himself when he was younger, that often wrong, never in doubt. And so, you know, I think, again, I'm sure I suffered from it, but maybe less than others. Now, that probably introduced a whole bunch of problems, right? But I think that I didn't really view myself as a CEO when I started Irish Titan. Even though I came out, like I mentioned, my first job was at Principal Financial Group, which invested a lot in training, pulled me into management early. You know, I might have long hair and a beard and earrings and stuff like that and say funny things and introduce a lot of chaos. But I'm a pretty serious businessman, and I take this pretty seriously. But at first, I really viewed myself more as a hustler, if you will. Like, I needed to get out there and do stuff every day to build Irish Titan. And then I moved into more of an owner sort of mentality. And I think recently I've moved into, in the last few years, whatever that period might be, more of a CEO mentality, right? And so I think if at the beginning of Irish Titan, if I would have thought of myself as a CEO, that might have exaggerated whatever imposter syndrome I might have been experiencing, but I didn't really. I was just getting out there trying to, speak frankly, like I said, I grew up on a farm in Iowa. I was getting out there every day trying to make shit happen. And then grew it into a business where I felt like I was an owner, and we were a successful growing business. Now I have a management team and a whole bunch of things in place, which we'll probably talk about more. We'll see where Rick takes us. But now I think of myself more as a CEO, and some of that reframing, I think, was part of not an overwhelming amount of imposter syndrome.
Cora?
I think, you know, it was interesting with this question because I think of myself usually as a pretty confident person, but I think there's always this spectrum from self-doubt to self-aware to egotistical. And you want to be at self-aware. And the problem is, oftentimes you don't know which one you're being. So, there's a fine line between you're being self-aware because you know you could be wrong, but how much is that knowing you could be wrong actually self-doubt? And so I think that that's where having, a cohort of people to talk to is helpful for that. I think the other, challenge with being a CEO is that, I once saw a statistic about something like, I wish I knew what the actual numbers were, but it was something like 60 to 75% of boards think their CEO is inadequate, and 60% of CEOs think their board has no idea what they're doing.
Don't have a board.
Right. Well, I happen to have a board, so I have to manage a board, and because I brought in other people's money, and that comes with a whole nother level of interesting things, let's say, but. So I think that's one of the challenges, is just recognizing when are you doubting yourself and when are you just being self-aware, and knowing that I think a lot of my confidence has started to develop just from knowing no one's done what I'm doing. No one knows how to do my job right. And that's part of my job, is to figure out the best I can how to do it right today. And every day you're building business, you're trying to figure out what's the right priority to place on things, but there's no right way to do it. And I think one of the things that I've started to learn is that you're also immersed in a number of people who, when you're meeting them, they are presenting their confident self. And so you start to read between the lines. Like I suffer from coastal envy. Like I look at how much money a Silicon Valley company is able to raise on nothing, or a Boston company is able to raise on nothing. And so you get to know these CEOs, and sometimes they'll say, I've decided to put off my fundraise for now, and then you realize, it's actually that I'm persistent and I am keeping it going, and they gave up. But knowing how to reinterpret some of the maybe overconfident statements you hear is important for calibrating where you're at and keeping yourself grounded. So,
if there, for both of you, if there was kind of one thing that you might say to the business people out there, what's maybe given you the most help in this area, or what would you say, hey, consider this, or what little nugget of wisdom would you share with the audience on this front?
Around the imposter syndrome theme. So some of it's driven by what kind of business you're in, right? Like I've been building a company. And so there's a leadership model that talks about 5 different archetypes of leaders: trailblazer, architect, coach, manager, tactician. Tactician is someone who does whatever it is the company does. So in my space, it might be a programmer or a designer, somebody like that. That's not me, actually. I'm trailblazer and coach. So I knew from the beginning that I needed to surround myself with some people that could check those boxes over time, because at first I was checking all but one of those boxes. So I think some of it is that self-awareness of what skills you fit within your business and what it needs. Leadership's a team sport, as I mentioned, so building a team around me that helps keep me in check, that we have honest, transparent conversations. They make Irish Titan better. They make me better. I also think that if you start to get a sense of how your talents are best brought to bear, including what gives you energy, then that solves a lot of problems, or challenges at least. So for example, I have a 40-30-20-10 model, where I spend 40% of my time on face of the company sorts of activities, things like this. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I do a lot of speaking around the country, do a lot of conferences, etc. All of that would be that 40%. 30% is people and culture, 20% are strategy, and 10% operations. Well, if you look at least the 40 and 30, that's all people driven. And so I might still have those level 1 decisions when I go home, but this gives me energy. Not necessarily stand up in front of talking to people, that does too, but just being around people, talking to them, going to events, etc., which also actually helps the business, right? That's at 40%. So I think that there's a whole series of things that I've done there that I think have helped me navigate any of that loneliness.
Anything to add, Cora?
I guess I would just add, you mentioned going out. I think it's important to get that external view looking in at your company, both for shaping who your company is, as well as to kind of calibrate how you're doing. I mean, that's where, the CEO cohort that I'm in, it really helps with that, because you can see, some of these problems I'm dealing with, people in other companies, other CEOs are also struggling with, and here's some of the things that I see that they could do better, but also that's where they can help, because they've been there, they've seen it before as well, and it's hard to find sometimes as your cohort.
I'll add one real quick thing. I'm a big fan of peer groups too. I've been in peer groups. I'm in one local and one e-commerce focused global. One thing someone told me years ago is, one of the things we've probably heard is you're a reflection of the 10 people that you spend the most time with, or something like that, right? Which I think there's truth in that. But a little bit of a spin on that I heard a few years ago is that everybody's a math operator. Everybody in your life's a math operator. Everybody you encounter is a math operator, meaning they add to your life, they subtract from your life, they multiply your life, or they're divisive in your life, right? I think there's absolute truth to that. And so I already mentioned I'm from Iowa. I don't suffer from Minnesota nice, so I'm not too hesitant to just kind of move on from someone that is either a subtraction sign or a divider sign for me. And I think that is a good way to avoid imposter syndrome, loneliness, end every day feeling better than you started, and generally move forward, right? Because I think there's absolute truth to that.
So a couple things. As I mentioned, we're just kind of working out a little bit of the kinks to make these things happen. In the past, I would have said it's 1 o'clock and we're calling it quits. This time, I'm going to say, hey, if you got to go, get up and go. I'm going to go a little bit longer. Got a lot of other stuff. We'll go kind of a little bit shorter, lightning roundy kind of stuff. But anyway, if you need to go, feel free. All right, so tight labor market, both your businesses heavily dependent on creative, sophisticated, talented people. What's a short answer for kind of how are you surviving this, and what are you doing to thrive best as you can anyway?
I'm recognizing that right now Chromatic is in a space where it's one of those career high environments. It's one of those work environments where everyone wants to be there. I haven't lost a single person in years, unless I let them go. And part of that is knowing to let people go if they aren't going to add to the culture. And so one of the things that I do, we keep ice cream in the freezer. That seems to be huge. We take people out to the Twins game. We have sourdough. But fundamentally, what happens and what I try to keep an eye on is that everyone reinforces each other in our daily work, and everyone loves working there. So that's, and we also have the benefit of being in what I would call a hot industry, right? So a lot of people who come out of school, if you say, hey, do you want to go work at a startup 3D printing company? They're like, heck yeah. So that's definitely been a help as well. But definitely keeping that focus on making sure that the culture is reinforced. Things can creep, right? So you can have, keeping an eye on whether there's some sort of dynamic that needs to be stopped, and getting on top of that right away, I put a very high priority on, and that keeps a very positive environment. So, while also allowing people to be individuals, right? So that's the other thing, is that I think we do a good job of creating a space where people can be individualistic. We just try to make sure that they also are positive with their teammates and like working together. So.
We've been pretty people-driven and culture-driven for a long time. We didn't really call it culture back then when I started to define it. So I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, big fan of Guy Kawasaki, if you know either of those authors. And they speak to a lot of leadership sorts of values and traits and models and those sorts of things, which really spoke to me pretty early. And actually it was in 2011 when we defined our golden circle using Simon Sinek speak. And later in 2011, it was June 15th, 2011. I remember the day because I actually met Simon Sinek in person here in town. And it was later, sometime in the fall, when we defined our values. So our golden circle, our why is business first, online second, our how is partnerships, not transactions, and our what is building and growing e-commerce channels. Our 5 core values are POTUS, which is not political, stands for passion, ownership, teamwork, impact, and skills. And so we've had that defined, both of those, for a long time, which I think gave us sort of a North Star, if you will, on how to talk about the company, how to attract people, retain them, weed a few out if they didn't fit the culture. And so I think that we've had, by our industry standards, our turnover is actually far lower than industry standards. I think some of that's driven by what I just mentioned with the golden circle and our core values. I think some of it's driven by our Titan only model, because our Titans are working shoulder to shoulder every day instead of some of the companies. And I'm not saying it's any better or worse, but other companies have contractors, freelancers, offshore resources. Those people come and go, and they don't create quite the same bond, right? Like, I think sometimes our Titans feel obligated is not the right word, but feel invested in each other and helping each other. And I think that has helped attract people and retain them. Maybe to anticipate something real quick, like during the pandemic and over the last few years, we haven't had to change a lot. Like, we already could have been virtual, we weren't. We did go hybrid, so we have people in the office 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and we've defined those days because I think the only reason to have people in the office is for them to work together on certain kinds of activities that lend themselves better to being in person, seeing the whites of each other's eyes, breathing the same air, and creativity and collaboration and culture sorts of things. That doesn't happen if you let people pick any 2 random days, right? So we define the days, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. We also have pay bands that are public. So each of our teams, our engineers, our creatives, our project managers, et cetera, have pay bands that are tied to title and promotion. So we have that, and which has been, actually, that was a really nice step forward. It removed a lot of the mystery around it, and we did that, I think, 3 years ago now. Then during the pandemic, we had to raise our pay bands because, like all of us, right, wages have increased. We were in an industry that I think experienced more than that, or a little on the higher end of the spectrum, so we had to do that. We've rolled out a mandatory 2-week PTO program. We have open PTO, where as long as people hit their annual targets and metrics, they can take, quote unquote, as much PTO as they want, as long as they're hitting the targets. But we added, effective this coming January, a mandatory 2-week PTO, so that everybody in the company, each Titan, needs to be gone for 2 weeks consecutively at some point in the year for their own well-being and ours, because we need to be at a size and scale, and we are, where we don't need somebody for 2 weeks. We need to be able to live without any given person for 2 weeks. So those are a few things that we've done, both, I think, to create the environment we have and fine-tune a little bit with recent best practices.
Sure. So you introduced the hybrid post-COVID model. Cora, what are you doing in your office?
Nothing.
You chain them to the desk and you feed them ice cream.
Exactly. It's sourdough bread. No, we were officially one of the acceptance, classified as an essential business because we do chemistry and things like that. So we actually never, and so much of our work is in the lab, we can't really take it virtual. We have a couple of software people who do hybrid, and they still do hybrid. But I'm really grateful that we've been able to stay working together, and that was, we just maintained a really strict COVID policy. So also all the ventilation from chemistry, you have to have a building with lots of ventilation, meant that so far no one at work has spread COVID to someone else at work. So it's not that people haven't gotten COVID, it's that it just hasn't spread. So I think that's partly due to the work environment. So it's a pretty safe environment. So thankfully we have not had to do we've been able to keep that team working together. And for the software guys, they have defined days when they come in. So everyone knows when to expect them, and it drives that collaboration. So that's been, but my commercial team is completely virtual. None of them are in the shop. So, so that's always been hybrid. So I guess that's, yeah.
And you're across the pond, so that's a whole nother layer. Yeah. All right, so let's go to kind of a lightning roundy, kind of short answer. Let's see, you both have a business that is driven by some fairly demanding customers. Describe the importance of the sense of urgency for your team, given the customer dynamics as well as the pace of the businesses and industries that you're in. So sense of urgency.
It's high, and we always have trouble trying to, the trouble we have is that we have customers who act with, that we need to respond with urgency, but then they don't necessarily act with urgency with what we provide them. So that's something where we're always trying to balance the urgency.
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons e-commerce intrigued me is because it's a combination of technology, design, and marketing, which I like to live there, but it is P&L driven, right? It's not, quote unquote, just a website that's your digital business card. When we build an e-commerce site, our merchants are expecting that to drive revenue and profits. And so there is a certain amount of urgency around that we appreciate. I like urgency. Passion is one of our 5 core values, like I mentioned. And so the line I use about being closed only 2 days a year, other than St. Patrick's Day and the day after, is actually sort of true, because our merchants, if their site goes down, which doesn't happen very often, especially anymore with the newer e-commerce platforms, they expect that to be up, right? And so we have talks during the hiring process around that, and there is just, I think, inherent within our industry and the e-commerce niche within it, a sense of urgency that I appreciate, and I think the titans we attract sort of thrive on that.
One quick bit of advice that you'd get to either an aspiring entrepreneur or business owner, or one that's been around for a while. Short little nugget.
My short little nugget is know that when you become an entrepreneur, your whole family becomes an entrepreneur. So they all better be in it. So
pick the right pond. It's not about being a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond. Pick the right pond, and revenue is vanity. Profit is sanity. Cash is reality.
Last question, piece of advice that you received in your career journey that you wish you would have gotten earlier?
I struggle with that. I think I needed to make my own mistakes. I already said, like, I don't take direction well and some of those sorts of things. And so I don't know that any advice that I've heard I wish I would have heard earlier. What I would say is 2 things. I wish I would have known some of the models that I know now a little bit earlier, like there's the trust performance matrix. If anybody knows that, I won't go into it, but things like that 3 levels of decision making that I mentioned earlier. And what I absolutely really firmly believe is there are a number of people that I wish I would have known earlier in my career. So like, I think it's no secret, Rick and I are good friends, we know each other a lot. Like, you're someone that I wish I would have met earlier in my career, right? I think that meeting some of those people earlier in my career is actually something I would have benefited more from than a piece of advice earlier in my career.
I think along similar lines, I think when I was younger, I was always told to network, and it was always in the context of you network to get ahead. And I think what I wish I had known is that the real reason why you network is all those same people just keep coming back. And so you never know who can help you do better. And so the importance of networking is just to keep learning, and because you're never going to be able to know how to solve problems yourself. You need the people that you meet, and so that's why you network. It's not to, yes, you network to get ahead, but it's really more important you network because you need to get help, and you can never do it on your own. So.
Okay, so let's give Cora Leibig and Darren Lynch a round of applause. Reminder that our next meeting is December 1st. The future is fractional. Kathy will be one of our panelists. And thank you again for coming. This was an important day for me personally, and I think for a lot of folks that are now just kind of getting out and trying to do some good stuff as we look into the future and move forward. So thank you for being here. Thanks for supporting Club E, and thank you for supporting me and all the work we do. Thanks.